something that another one of our clients that has a big event every year, and they have to wipe off the data every year and start anew. Maybe instead of wiping off the data, we have a container that we just launch a new container for that every year, and it's just fresh. We don't have to worry about like wiping all the old stuff off and forgetting something and resetting all the counters and all that. We just containerize it and say, boom, here's a new instance. And year to year, we can actually do updates to the container and upgrade to new feature sets and new stuff next year without affecting the previous year. So those are all good ideas for when you might want to use a container.
Through the Noise Insights with Ernesto Gluecksmann and Mickey Panayiotakis.
Oh, right. Another episode of Insights, Through the Noise Insights. This is where Mickey educates Ernesto on things like containers and data, or attempts to.
Yeah, containers and data. Is this containers and data? So this is kind of weird because the screen, like nobody can hear this, of course. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and they can't see the video, but the screen is split. But then on the background, there's a door jump. So there's like this weird, like angled three-way.
Oh, I know. We're in my kitchen. But you know what? It will be out because we started a YouTube channel, although we haven't We did. We started just uploading because we're recording these things. So we might as well just put them somewhere.
Well, should I go outside where there is a nicer view?
No, you're fine. I don't think you can improve the view as much anyway.
It's true. I am fine. I am fine.
Containers is this episode topic because I've heard you talk about this in other spots, and I still vaguely even understand what this means. And so I think that there's probably people out there that are also wondering, what the heck is a container, and why does the IT guy talk about it like it's great, like it's the next thing in the world?
Well, I mean, because IT guys, we like new shiny things, and containers are new shiny things. So they do have some benefits, but they're also, one of the things that we also want to think about is, especially as we start developing bigger applications and we have, either new or IT guys come and go, is do we want to put our money in some sort of new exciting thing, or do we want to stay with the known and true and trusted? But the good thing about containers is not really an option between those two, because you can still use your known and trusted application software. And what a container lets you do is package it all in a single container, right? In a single unit that you can then distribute and replicate with ease. And theoretically, when you have new updates, you can distribute and replicate those with ease. That's the benefit of containers. Of course, like everything else, there's some overhead. There's, both in setting it up as well as in running the software. But the basic premise of it is that the overhead is not going to be as expensive as having maintaining multiple individual, servers and softwares and so on.
Okay, so let's break it down just a little bit more.
So what's a container, right?
Yeah, I mean, so think of it from the paradigm of we're an organization, we have a website, and we know that it's got to be hosted on a server, and it's in a server somewhere. Maybe it's hopefully not in a closet down the hallway, but it's on, like, at a data center or at a reputable hosting company.
Okay.
Where does this container concept start? Where does it fit?
Well, let's talk about not specifically a website, but an application to start with, right? Because a lot of what we used to call websites now are applications. They run some sort of service. They accept data, they process data, they do what things applications do. They have logic, they have inputs and outputs. It's not just a brochure. Here is kind of who I am and what I do. All right, so as you interact with your users and your application users, whether it's website or otherwise, there's data coming in and out. At some point, you'll find that you've exhausted the capabilities of your current platform, whether it's a server in your closet, whether it's a cloud system somewhere. For whatever reason, you either can't upgrade to a bigger server because it's not necessarily the right approach, or they may not, your hosting provider may not have a larger option for like a single server, or you just want to have a more distributed system to avoid single points of failure. And containers is basically a way to package all the individual software you need into a single box. So you can run it in multiple instances, launch multiple copies of it almost instantly, and say, hey, let's say Docker is a most famous container system, containerization system. Say, hey, Docker, run this instance. Or you say the hosting provider, hey, run this Docker container for this Docker application for me. And the application provider says, great, no problem, here it is. Now, how you do that is a little bit more complicated, but that's the basic premise. So you can say, okay, if I have a big event tomorrow, I have my website collects what do you call those things? Invitations and registrations for the events, right? And you're about to announce your big event tomorrow, and you expect to have 1,000 or 100,000 of your most loyal members come in first thing at 9 in the morning, and you announce your registration is open and register for your event. Well, your current website can't necessarily handle there's a fly. Oh no, that's a wasp. Your current we live in nature here. Your current website may not be able to handle 100,000 members coming in at this one time. So you say, if it's already containerized, you say, well, let's launch a couple more instances of it for the next couple of days, where we can have multiple websites distributed all over the country or all over the world to handle these new registrations, and then we just tear them down and just stay back with one. So it's an easy way to scale up and scale back down without worrying too much about about launching new servers and imaging a server and so on and so forth.
So for example, I think many people are obviously going to be familiar with subscribing to software. They get their own. Let's say they stick with the association world. The AMS, the association management software, or the database that tracks their members and dues and who's doing what when, that might actually be in a container automatically by the software creator. The company that creates that software may create an instance for your organization, put that in a container so it's secured and packaged just for you guys, and it lives in the cloud. Is that about?
Well, it would be
reasonable assumption.
There would be a container from the software maker, but then you'd also want to customize it, right? The thing with software today, it's not that you don't get software and run it, So I was gonna sort of associate this to the old school days where you just buy a CD of Microsoft Office.
Oh man, you're gonna. And if you think about it, people listening to this don't know what a CD is.
Yeah, it's little round things that you can use to make sure your drill is straight when you're drilling down. If you look it up on YouTube, but if you think about it, that's a very, very basic container, because you're buying a container, a physical thing that has everything you need. If you have the right machine, right? If you buy your Microsoft computer or Intel, whatever it is, your Windows computer, and you have this container, which is a physical CD, and you put it in, and in some ways, Microsoft has millions, or if not hundreds of millions of copies of identical software running all over the world, because we each individually run that software on our computers. That's not 100% a container, though, because as soon as I customize my Microsoft Word with my macros, or with my shortcuts, or with my fonts, then I can no longer replicate it and keep those customizations. So if you take this original Microsoft Office idea, Microsoft Word idea, or Microsoft Excel, where you have to write a couple of custom functions to use on your personal copy, if you take that idea and you're able to, on top of the base copy of Word or Excel, also somehow containerize or create a disk that has your individual changes. And now you can distribute that to multiple computers, and you have a shared data source between all of them. Then you can run your Microsoft Excel, spreadsheet macro that you had on your local computer. You can run it in 100 different computers just by saying, this is my macro. And you say, hey, this macro requires the Excel. So the good thing about containers is you don't have to put everything that you use in the container. You can say, my container requires this other container. So for a company that has registrations, you don't have to have your registration software include everything that the vendor has as well. So your vendor could have a container for their registration software, and you would install your customizations and say, this is my container with my registration software, which requires the vendor's software too to run. So that downloads all the software and it just runs it all physically in a container. And if you need 2 copies, you say replicate this or run it multiple times. Put one here, put one in Cairo, and put one in San Francisco.
To distribute the load, as they say, where people requesting from around the world to go to your event might go to different, might be served by a computer closer to them. So I think that's part of the beauty of the container system, right? Is like there's this ability to scale the need, right? Because I hear that in Amazon Web Services, how they sort of sell the concept. It's in the old days, you would have to estimate how much web traffic you're going to get, and that's notoriously difficult to do. And then B, you have to especially like an event that happens once a year, twice a year, whatever it is, that the load spikes up to a certain amount. So you would estimate how much traffic, you'd buy a big enough server, beefy enough with enough memory to deal with the day-to-day, and then maybe some of the spike load, but you don't really know until sort of happens if you got enough.
Right.
For the
thing number one, you don't know if you have enough. You hope you do. Number two, most of the time it stays there idle because you're sizing for those spikes, and most of the time you're down here.
So you're paying extra for that.
And number three, you have 1, maybe 2, and you load balance them. And if one fails, then you're at half capacity, and it's just weird. And if you have load balancing, then you have to kind of figure out how to share the data, which is also an issue with containers, but containers can help with that as well. Because when you launch containers, you say, I want you to use this data store, which the data store itself, you can think of it as its own separate container that's distributed, if you need that to be the case. And the other benefit, by the way, is that if you make some updates and say, hey, my price structure now for the 2021 event that opens next week is different from last year's event. So now we need to launch all these new price tables and whatever it is. Well, if you have it in the container, you just say, hey, upgrade these containers to the next version, and they automatically all get updated. You don't have to worry about pushing the code here and then pushing it over there. Revision control will help with some of that, but not necessarily all. But that's the basic premise, is you're able to replicate it. The trick is, how much of is it going to be code or database? And when you have things that are stored in both, how does that work? How do you handle database updates? The shared storage is an issue. And of course, if you don't need the replication, if you don't need any of those things, there's no need to actually have everything in a container.
So what might be some use cases that you would consider a possible approach with containerizing, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually, I haven't solved this problem yet, but I want to work with a couple of our clients and our smarter than me system administrators and developers to come up with a way to containerize WordPress in a way that makes sense, right? Because it doesn't make sense to put all of WordPress in a container that you then replicate just to have it in a container that you can only have one of, because the database is stored in the container and the file system is stored in the container and you can't share it between containers. It also doesn't make sense to me to have to upgrade every one of my containers to upgrade each of the instances of WordPress, because I want to update the WordPress core itself is not my application, it's not my code. So it's someone else's responsibility, logically to me, to have whoever owns the WordPress core code to upgrade those containers. So how do I take something like the modifications, customizations, custom plugins, custom modules, custom themes, and containerize them and use them in addition to WordPress, so that I can, when I have an update to a plugin that we use, I push that out to all of my WordPress containers, and they also get updated. My stuff gets updated, but also the contributed modules get updated, and the core modules get updated separately from my updates. So that's kind of a challenge right now, because it's kind of it's neater to containerize something that's as fully controlled by you as possible. So we have one client that's doing a custom database, and that whole custom thing is going to be containerized. The database storage is not going to be. It's that the database storage is going to be a cloud database as a service, Amazon RDS service, but the code itself is going to be on a container, which means that we can upgrade, update, push different changes to it, create multiple nodes, replicate. We can even change providers. We can say, we're Amazon right now. We don't have our Docker in an Amazon, the Docker container in an Amazon, cloud computing environment. But we don't like Amazon anymore. We want to go with Azure, and we can launch our Docker container in Azure instead, or in Google Drive, or whichever cloud provider you want to use.
These was just ever extending levels of the abstraction that are hard to even keep up with, what everything is happening.
I mean, at its very basic, it's controlling the environment that your application runs in. Because if you think about launching something like WordPress, or an AMS, or a CRM, or whatever it is, you need, technically, it's all like a LAMP platform, right? Linux, Apache, MySQL, or Postgres, or MariaDB, some sort of database, and PHP. But then you say, okay, well, I need to have PHP 7.4, not 7.3, and MySQL at least version 10. I think actually MySQL 5.6, and MariaDB maybe version 10. But I also need the specific Apache modules installed that aren't necessarily. So, there's always configurations within a server that you have to have set up in order for your application to run. If you containerize that, you say, my container includes everything. I define everything I need in my container. So now the server, the hosting side of things, all it has to do is read through the container configurations and download and make sure it installs everything it needs.
When you want to turn on another one, extend it or expand it for whatever reason. Okay. But you still would then have to write some kind of custom code to share information between containers, because in theory, the container is its own isolated, secure environment for that application that it's running, right?
Well,
so want them to talk to each other, share a database.
Yeah. Well, databases, it's easy because you have your database server or your cloud database, and you just say your container connects to that cloud storage.
Got it.
You could also have containers connect to a similar data storage, not database, but actually disk storage. So you can say this container connects to the data path for this container is X, which is outside the container. So you can still have things that are outside the container, so the different containers can talk to each other, because if they don't share data, then what's the point of replicating and making it easy to grow?
Right. If you're totally siloed off, it's just an unconnected computer, it would seem like. Okay. Wow. So I guess in the world of organizations, I mean, is there something to keep an eye out on other than your hosting bill every month that you could think of, from a person who's managing an organization's infrastructure, but they're not necessarily steep in the details. What might be an area for them to go to their tech people and say, hey, are we using containers for something like this? Would that be beneficial?
I think the key is if you have something that you replicate a lot, either because you have different, we have a client that has multiple microsites, and we want to think about a way to be able to create another microsite that can have a subset of a set of tools developed, and do that without basically recreating everything from scratch. That may be an easy way, a good reason to have a container. Or if you have something that, another one of our clients that has a big event every year, and they have to wipe off the data every year and start anew. Maybe instead of wiping off the data, we have a container that we just launch a new container for that every year, and it's just fresh. We don't have to worry about wiping all the old stuff off and forgetting something and resetting all the counters and all that. We just containerize it and say, boom, here's a new instance. And year to year, we can actually do updates to the container and upgrade to new feature sets and new stuff next year without affecting the previous year. So those are all good ideas for when you might want to use a container. If you have one thing that you're going to use once, you're not going to replicate, it's going to be there where it is, then it's just adding overhead, I think.
So it's almost like if you have a configurable process that you have to recreate the environment or recreate that process for somebody else, a new partnership or a new member, whatever it is, and it's happening a lot, and you need to make sure that the basics are still the same when you recreate them. That might be a zone for something like this.
Yeah, if you need to do something not once or twice, but 10, 50, 100, 1,000 times, like how do you do that? And that could be like, I want to grow tenfold tomorrow because I have a big event, or that could be, I have the same small event, but I need to start from scratch every 3 months or every 6 months or every year for the next 5 years, or even for 3 or 4 years. Any of those situations, anytime you want to replicate easily and grow, I think that's a good candidate for a container
without over engineering or over buying servers, right?
That's the key. Right. I mean, I think it might be a nice practice, session for a developer to put something in a container. But if you're not going to use the benefits of a container, then you're over engineering it. You're adding overhead. You're spending time when it's not necessarily going to get back.
Gotcha. All right. I think that's enough to digest in one sitting.
So I'll tell you for you and me, because we have obviously multiple clients and we manage all the stuff, we have a lot of tools that we've developed in-house for like backups and intrusion detection stuff and a whole bunch of things that it would be nice to containerize so that, and it's not if we do that, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because they're going to run on top of a server. So we can't necessarily mix and match that, but it would be nice to have something where we can containerize that and say this is like the very basic platform environment that Mickey and Ernesto host. And then on top of that, people can bring in their own software, maybe their WordPress or their web server that's custom, or the custom website or something, and be able to do that. And it's actually, that's backwards. The way it would normally work out is we would containerize a generic hosting image, either with WordPress or with Drupal, depending on what the client needs or whatever custom website, and then would include our
tool set
containers. Because we talked about a container, but really there's like an entire package that's involved in it. And when you send something out, you say, I don't need just my container, I need all these other containerized services from all these other services. And that whole package is put together in the container, includes all the other little boxes.
Right. It's not, you don't want to have to install all those software packages to do things like scanning for malware for each client's new setup, website or database or whatever it is. We have our tool set that we're using, improving over time, and we just want to be able to install it and move forward with it. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Mickey. I don't know if this is helpful, let us know.
It's
if you can find that YouTube channel, because we haven't promoted it, but it's out there.
Cool. We'll be out there. We'll have to answer questions. We'll see how many people write and tell us how wrong we are. That's what we're going to be there on YouTube. And then we try to break it down to like brass tacks, and sometimes that becomes a little bit more or less kind of smooth around the edges than actually like truly accurate. But we'll see.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate
You're welcome.
Okay.
For more episodes of Through the Noise, go to throughthenoise.us.